talking to book people about books and other stuff.
Hello and welcome to Talking to Book People about books and other stuff. And I am about to give a ring to Gill Hornby, who is a novelist who has written 3 novels now, and the latest is Miss Austen, which is a reimagining of the life of Cassandra Austen and her relationship with her more famous sister Jane. And Cassandra is maybe most known for burning the correspondence between Jane and Cassandra, and fortunately Gill is on hand to rewrite some of that correspondence and to look a little deeper into their lives. So it's a fascinating novel, and it will also be fascinating to find out what Gill has been up to whilst we've all been in this state of lockdown. So let's give her a ring and see what she's got to tell us. So thank you so much for agreeing to have a chat. And where are you managing to experience this thing we're all experiencing from home, at least?
Yes, thank goodness. And also thank goodness we live in the country.
Yeah.
So we're very lucky. There's none of this having to march around a park for an hour a day, which I think must be very hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're in the country, in the village of Kimbry, which is in my book.
Yeah.
I've got 2 of my children here. I wish I had 4, but and my husband and a dog. So things could be worse. And I must say, not just about my kids, but all the young ones, I think they've been absolutely remarkable, actually. Because for them, you know, for us, it's just another year. But I've got, my youngest is missing his first year of university. You know, he'll never see his room in college again. And they've just been very uncomplaining about it. Also, I think people have really got the message, most people, that even if we're not perhaps in danger, people they care about might be, and or even people they don't even know, and they've taken it responsibly. It's been, I do think it's been a remarkable gesture on everybody's part, as I say, particularly young people.
What about where were you writing? Had you begun
I'm researching. I'm researching.
You're researching.
So, I mean, this is the period when I should be doing a literary festival every week.
Yeah.
Banging on about my book, but I'm not. And I'm supposed to be researching. I have to say, the first 3 weeks, my concentration was so fragmented.
Really?
That I really couldn't focus. But now I'm getting much, much better.
Okay.
I'm so fed up of people saying that during the plague, Shakespeare wrote King Lear and the rest of it. You know, he didn't have Twitter, did he?
No.
And also, I'm sure he wasn't mopping the floors. So I found life very
nobody was mopping the floor.
Nobody was mopping any floor, which is what's ended up here, actually. Oh, God, forget it. But the constant in-house catering, I have to say, is something I haven't been used to for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm getting back to it. And also, I think I'm quite lucky because I'm writing again in the 19th century. Right. And I do have friends who are writing contemporary novels.
Yeah.
And they're in the middle of them, and people are going to the theatre or getting onto the train or going to a rave. Yeah. And I don't know what the normal is going to be for the next 5 years, or perhaps, you know, again, if variations of this keep coming along. Yeah. But the 19th century was a time of natural social distancing. Nobody kissed anybody else when they went into a room.
Yeah.
They curtsied, which we might have to go back to doing here. And also there was the ever present risk of contagion and your loved ones being carried off. So I'm not having to sort of transport myself psychologically as much as I think people writing books set in the 21st century.
It's an interesting point that people, the thought that half-written novels are going to have to be tweaked if they are genuinely set entirely contemporary. And what about
period fiction?
Yeah, exactly. With the research in terms of the method, would you ordinarily be doing that anyway, 99% based at a computer, or is there any extent to which you'd be going either to other places or to libraries?
I really need to go to Kent.
Really?
I really need to go to Kent. So that is starting. That will become a pressing problem in a month or 2, and will hold up my progress. I need to go and burrow myself away in a library, and I need to go and walk in places and tramp around and stare at things. and feel things.
Yeah.
And Lord knows when we're going to be doing that.
In terms of Miss Austen, to tell people about how it came about, how you came to write the book. I'd love to know a couple of things. One, where your love of all things Austen sort of first generates from, and another thing, I'd love to know how it came that Cassandra Austen was sort of put front and center of this book, and how that became your vehicle for this story.
Yeah, well, they're two different processes. Jane Austen came into my life at school, and I had an English teacher in sixth form who was one of those teachers who sort of changes you, and she was a great Janeite, and so she got hold of me at that age. So that's where that came from. But I never had engaged with the life at all. I just engaged with the novels. And then 27 years ago, we moved into this house in Kimberley, where I'm sitting now. And we were told that there was a Jane Austen connection to the house.
Right.
And on further discovery, I found out really it was a Cassandra Austen connection to the house, because we live in an old vicarage, and the vicars who lived here during Austen's time were very, very close friends of the Austens. And so they always used to come here on their way to Bath or on their way to Cheltenham. They'd break their journey here. And Cassandra became engaged to the second son of the vicar. And it was very perfect, because the vicar was the best friend of Jane Austen's father, and the kids had all grown up together. So it was a very perfect match. But he was a curate on £250 a year. So they had to wait. And instead of waiting, Tom went off on a sort of get rich quick scheme so he could marry her sooner, and never came back. So she was effectively a widow who had never been married. I mean, I became haunted by her, really, because all of those women in the 19th century, who we never hear about, the 19th century has been written by men. The records of it, the diaries, the letters, they're all from men. Yeah. And those women who sort of missed the boat life-wise, and they're silent to us. Yeah. So I became very intrigued by her and very haunted by her staying here on Tom's last Christmas and saying goodbye to him before he went off and never seeing him again. Then I was asked to write a book by Short Books, a biography of Jane for younger readers, younger people, 8 to 12-year-olds. And then that's when I sort of engaged with Cassandra and what she was like, because she is the person who Jane writes to in all of the letters that we've got. Yeah. And you can tell the love between them and the respect that Jane has for her. Yeah. She looked up to her. She was her elder sister. And then you read the family memoirs, and they're very disrespectful of Cassandra. They talk about her as joyless and dreary and stuff like that. And Jane was not a kind of, she didn't suffer fools gladly. She wouldn't have put up with this elder sister if she thought she was like the family did. So I became very furious on her behalf. Of course, the reason everybody hates Cassandra is because she outlived Jane by 25 years. And at the end of her life, she sat down and burnt nearly all of their letters, including all of the letters that Cassandra had written back to her. So she is a silent creature. Yeah. And I thought then, this was 15 years ago, I thought, oh, burning of the letters, there's a novel. Yeah. But it really, I don't think I had the courage to do it, because it was a novel in which Jane Austen had to walk and talk and think and live. And then clearly I had to write all the letters that Cassandra had burned. And I wasn't quite fearless enough. But so I wrote 2 contemporary novels, and then I thought, well, now or never. Right. So I had to go.
And was writing the letters markedly more difficult than writing the remainder of the book, or the plot at the, of spanning the plot? Is it a different area of your skill that has to go into that?
Well, it's ventriloquism, really, but I think there's ventriloquism through the whole book, because I have so much dialogue, around the Austen family table, between the sisters and so on. I started very happily, and I very much wanted to make this about Cassandra, not about Jane. So I kept delaying her entrance, because I was genuinely scared of bringing her in. Yeah. And then, then I think, oh God, she's got to come in here, and I'd write a sentence and then delete it and go and walk the dog. Yeah. And then I was very lucky in that I hadn't been commissioned to write it. So people weren't looking over my shoulder. In fact, I didn't show a soul until the end.
Right.
When I showed my husband and my agent and my eldest daughter, who now works in publishing. So eventually I said to myself, look, probably nobody's ever going to read this. This is just going to be in a drawer. Just do it, have a laugh. And actually I found that once I'd got her or got the her that I wanted to do, I couldn't shut her up. She became extremely garrulous and I had to sort of slightly chop her out of there. Yeah. So in fact, the letters, they were very quick. They came very quickly.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, because of the 162 that we've got, they have a very specific tone. Yeah. And they're only entirely about what they were doing, who they were seeing, where they were going, what they were wearing. Those are the basis of them. And when they first came out in the 40s, there was a great hoo-ha that how could this woman with such a fine mind have not mentioned the war with the French or enclosure or anything like that? But she was writing to her sister. They knew what each other thought about that. What they wanted was gossip and news and material because they were apart. And she also says, and I think the first letter she ever writes to Cassandra is to here, to this house, when Cassandra's come on that first Christmas. And she's very young, and she says something like, so I paraphrase here, I've got the hang of this letter writing, Lark. You have to write as if you're talking to the person like they're sitting next to you. Yeah. And I thought, well, if that's how you say you talked, then I'll take your word for it. And so then I was able to model my dialogue on the sort of tone of the letters. Yeah. And I didn't know if I got away with it or not, but actually, since it went to a lot of Jane Austen experts who know a lot more than I do before publication, and they were jolly nice about it. And in fact, Deirdre LeFay, who is the editor of the letters and really the guardian of all Jane Austen studies, she read the novel and didn't even mention the heresy of the fact that I'd made up a load of novels. Letters. She made a list of howlers, like they didn't bounce on the bed springs because there weren't any bed springs and that sort of thing. Really? Which was jolly useful. Yeah. I was able to take all of them out.
That's why you go through that process?
Yeah, no, it was great. It means that there's nothing for reviewers to stub their toe on when they come.
And what about, because I mean, the thing is, you know, you mentioned the word Janeites earlier. There are so many obsessive fans of Jane Austen. So with this, were you, when it was released into the world and when you maybe, I don't know how many events you've already done before this, were you very nervous of you know, the reactions and the scrutiny that it would be put under? Because as soon as you involve super fans, it's a bit different to just a novel, you know, I would imagine.
Yes, exactly. I think I was lucky because before publication, in manuscript actually, it went to Deirdre LeFay, Gillian Dow, Maggie Lane, Hazel Brooks, and Helena Kelly. Right. And they all went through it and they were all incredibly supportive and gave quotes. Yeah. And so once I'd gone through them, actually, I felt safe. The super fans are another lot entirely, I think, because they don't actually always know as much as the actual experts. No. And she's interesting, Jane, because Cassandra destroyed so many of these letters. What she left us with is the skeletal idea of an almost perfect, moodless creature who loved her family and was happy with her lot and just dashed off novels to please everybody. Yeah. Which is totally not true. You know, she was a kind of tortured creative genius. It's quite evident. And she wrote because she couldn't help but write. And she'd read everything. She was an incredibly well-read woman, and she knew her stuff was good. She knew what she was writing was better than everybody else's. Yeah. She was competitive for it, and she was took her publication extremely seriously. Yeah. But because we don't have any meat on these bones because of these destroyed documents, the super fans take the evidence from the novels and attribute it to Jane the person. So I think they all think she's a bit like Lizzie Bennet, you know, terribly sparky and irreverent and stuff like that. Yeah. And she wasn't at all, you know, she was quite spiky and mercurial. and so on. And she was never going to be a romantic heroine, but the superfans turn her into a romantic heroine.
Yeah. Yeah, we see it in September every year with the Jane
You
Austen.
do.
Yeah,
You do.
a lot of
You
people wandering into the shop dressed.
You're in the hub of it there.
Yeah, dressed
The
in
other thing about it that made me nervous is there are so many descendants. And I only did about 12 bookshop talks before we got shut down. But nearly everyone I did, at the end, somebody would come up in the queue and say, I'm a descendant.
Oh no.
There are millions, because although Jane didn't have kids, their siblings had 11, 12,
right.
18, you know.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of them around.
And how do you think what do you think Jane and Cassandra would have found most difficult, respectively, about lockdown? If they were in lockdown?
Nothing at all.
They think it would have been
Nothing at all. They'd have had each other, which they loved.
Yeah.
I mean, by the time they were in the last section of Jane's life, when they were living in the cottage in Chawton, and Jane was writing, and they were living with their best friend Martha and their mother, and they were living this sort of feminist ideal, really. The mother did the garden, Martha did the cooking, Cassandra ran the house, Jane wrote her masterpieces, Jane read the masterpieces in the evening. Yeah. You know, they liked it when people came to stay and when their family was up staying at the big house, but they also loved it when they were on their own. Yeah. They were all very clever. They played lots of parlour games. They weren't tech dependent like we were. They certainly were by that age way over parties and also, yeah, as I say, I think Jane liked about 8 people on the earth. So when she was forced to go into groups with much larger, I think she found it very irritating. Right. And I think she found men on the whole, the 19th century man, and his general pomposity, she found enormously irritating. So I don't think she'd have missed any of it. No. They'd have lived on their vegetables and milked their cow and had a laugh. Yeah, they're much better set up. Yeah.
How have you found this period for reading? Have you read more prolifically? Have your habits changed?
Well, again, in the first couple of weeks, I couldn't read at all. Then, really, for purposes of research, as well as just to refresh myself, I reread Jane Eyre, and that was great. And that, that was so other. And since then, actually, I have been on a roll. I've just finished Hamnet.
Okay, yes.
Is about contagion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But obviously marvellous. But not much of a holiday from that point of view.
No.
And I've just started Way Beyond the Curve Milkman, which I'm astonished by and loving. When it won the Booker, there was so much sniffing. And actually, I think it's brilliant. But I seem to have opened up again now. And also, because we've got, like your neighbours will have, a blessed, wonderful local bookshop. Yeah. And after a week, they opened up again, and they'll bring things to your. So I keep thinking of new things desperately that I want, so that I can buy them off them, so that they can drop them off, and then they're just earning a bit of money.
So, which is your indie? Is that Hungerford Books?
Hungerford Books.
Yeah, great. Oh, I love it. Alex wonderful. And Emma and all their team are brilliant, aren't they? And imagine for a minute that it did all just end and that it was all fine to run out. Where would you go to? What places? What
hairdresser?
Right, hairdresser. Yeah.
The hairdresser. And also another strange thing is, I mean, look, honestly, although I am not religious, I'm very sort of, I long to sit in a church and hear beautiful church music.
Oh, really?
I long to hear an organ and a choir. In a church setting. My mother died just before Christmas, which seemed terrible at the time, and I think, thank God she missed all this, because she was an extremely busy 94-year-old, and she would have gone nuts in this situation. But also, we got a wonderful funeral. We were so lucky. She had the sort of perfect send-off. But so the last time I sat in church and listened to beautiful music was the anthem during her funeral, which was utterly transporting. And that's one thing you can't replicate, I think, with technology or anything else. It's just so to smell that, old incense, have that and the chill on your skin, and listen to a choir in action. I miss it enormously. Hearing the bird song and seeing the sky. Last night there was a new moon with Venus next to it. I mean, dazzling. I don't think I've seen that before.
No, it is, and you're right about the sounds of the birds are having an absolute time. They love it. Well, listen, thanks for checking in with us and having a chat. That's been great. And
human.
Yes, exactly. And well, I hope that you get the chance to talk to some people about Miss Austen a bit more at some point. And I hope that you get to Kent. Super. Thanks very much. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Bye.
Please note, no book people were harmed in the making of this film, though some were technologically challenged. All books are available from www.mrbeesemporium.com.
Keep safe and keep reading.